I'm done. This is your divorce paper.
I just gave birth. Why now? You can't do this here. Why now?
The envelope hit her lap before she even saw his hand move. It landed with a weight that had nothing to do with paper. Tiana James looked down at it, at the clean white rectangle sitting across her thighs, and for a moment her mind simply refused to process it. She had surgical staples holding her abdomen together. She had an IV needle taped to the back of her left hand. She had 2 babies on her chest, a boy and a girl, 11 minutes old, still making the small trembling sounds of people who had just arrived somewhere unfamiliar and were not yet sure about it. And there was an envelope on her lap. She looked up at her husband. Jang Hyun-seok stood at the foot of her hospital bed in a charcoal suit that had never seen a wrinkle. He was not looking at the twins. He was looking at her with the particular expression of a man who has made a decision and is now simply waiting for the paperwork to confirm it. "Babe," she said. Her voice came out smaller than she intended, scraped thin by the medication and the exhaustion and the 6 hours of labor she had done alone in this building while he was somewhere she still did not know. "What is this?" he said. "Those are divorce papers." The room did not change. The monitors kept beeping. The IV kept dripping. The fluorescent light above her head kept humming its flat, indifferent hum. And yet something in the air shifted in a way that Tiana felt in her chest before she felt it anywhere else. The way you feel weather changing before you can see the sky. "Divorce," she repeated. The word sat in her mouth like something foreign. "I am done," Hyun-seok said. His voice was level, controlled. The voice of a man who had rehearsed this. "I cannot continue in this marriage. I think we both know it has not been real for a long time." Tiana looked at him. She looked at the man she had loved for 7 years, the man she had believed in before he believed in himself, the man whose debts she had helped cover, and whose doors she had helped open, and whose children she was currently holding against her chest, while her body was still stapled shut from the surgery she had undergone alone because he had not arrived in time. She looked at him, and she tried to find something in his face that resembled the man she had married. She could not find it. "Hyun-seok," she said carefully, "I just gave birth. I just had surgery. I have been in this hospital for 6 hours and you were not here for any of it." She stopped, took a breath. "And now you are standing at the foot of my bed with divorce papers." He said nothing. He held her gaze without flinching, and then from behind his left shoulder a voice, soft, deliberate, like a hand placed on a bruise. "It is better this way," said Jang Myung-ya. "Better for everyone. Better for my son." Tiana's eyes moved to the woman she had spent 3 years trying to earn. 61 years old, jade bracelet at her wrist, silk blouse pressed to perfection. The expression of a woman who had decided the outcome of this conversation long before she walked into the room. Hyun-seok's mother stood with the settled composure of someone who had not come to witness a confrontation. She had come to close one. And in the doorway, just behind them both, was a girl Tiana did not recognize. Young. Maybe 27. Wearing a cream dress in a hospital recovery room, which told Tiana everything she needed to know about why she was there and how long this had been planned. She was not hiding. She was standing exactly where a woman stands when she's been told she has already won. "How?" Tiana said quietly, looking back at Hyun-seok. "How are you standing here right now? You told me you were coming. I called you and you said you were on your way." Something moved briefly across his face and then was gone. "I know what I said, our children," Tiana said. Her voice cracked on the word and she stopped and pressed her lips together and started again. "Our children were in distress. They needed emergency surgery. I called you from the admissions desk. I called you from the waiting room. I called you when they told me they were taking me into the operating room and I needed you to be here." She looked at him steadily. "You said you were coming." Hyun-seok's jaw tightened. "I had things I could not leave immediately." "Things," she repeated. He did not elaborate. And then Myung-ya spoke again, stepping forward slightly, adjusting the angle of the conversation the way she always did, smooth and unhurried, like someone who had been managing rooms for decades. "Tiana," she said, and her tone carried a warmth that had always felt to Tiana like a coat that did not quite fit. "You are a strong woman. We have always known that about you. But strength is not the same as suitability." She paused, letting that word settle. "My son has become someone of real consequence. The world he moves in now, the people he is responsible to, they require certain things from the woman beside him. Things that require a shared foundation, a shared culture, a shared understanding of who we are." Tiana stared at her. "You are not that woman," Myung-ya said simply. "Not because of any fault in you, simply because of what you are and where you come from." She glanced at the twins then, briefly, the way you glance at a variable in an equation, and something in that glance made Tiana's arms tighten instinctively around them. "These children will be loved. We are not monsters. But this marriage has run its course. These children, Tiana said. Her voice had dropped very low. She looked at Myungya directly. You looked at your own grandchildren and said these children. Myungya held her gaze without expression. How am I even certain they are mine? Hyun Seok said. The nurse by the monitoring equipment made a sound. Not a word. Just a sound, involuntary, the kind that escapes a person when they hear something that the body rejects before the mind can catch up. Her hand had frozen on the clipboard. She was looking at Hyun Seok with an expression. She was clearly trying to keep professional and was not entirely succeeding. Tiana felt the words land. She felt them the way you feel something land when you are already so close to the edge of what you can hold that one more thing tips the entire balance. She looked at her husband, and for a long moment she did not speak. She was breathing, just breathing. In through her nose and out through her mouth, and holding the two most important things in her life against her chest with hands that had begun, very slightly, to shake. You know whose children these are, she said finally. I know what you have told me, Hyun Seok. Her voice was quiet and absolutely steady now, in the way that things are steady when something underneath them has finally, irrevocably settled. We have been together for 7 years. You know exactly whose children these are. You are saying this because someone told you to say it. She looked at him, not because you believe it. His jaw moved. He did not respond. The girl in the doorway shifted her weight. Tiana saw it in her peripheral vision and turned her head slightly, and they looked at each other for the first time. Tiana looked at her long enough to understand the full shape of what she was looking at. A woman who had been selected, who had been prepared, who was standing in a hospital recovery room in a cream dress because somebody had told her this was the day. The girl looked away first. Sign the papers, Hyun Seok said. His voice had returned to its flat, managed register. My attorney has already filed downtown. This is a formality. The sooner you sign, the simpler this becomes for both of us. Tiana looked down at the envelope on her lap. Then she looked at her son. He had Hyun Seok's jaw, that same firm, defined line, and she had noticed it the moment they placed him on her chest, and had felt, in spite of everything, a fierce and aching love for the fact that he carried his father's face. She looked at her daughter. Dark eyes already open and already watching, already absorbing the room with an attention that seemed too knowing for someone 11 minutes old. Her daughter had Tiana's eyes, and she was looking up at her mother with the focused, unwavering trust of someone who had decided without needing to think about it that this woman was safe. I am not signing anything today, Tiana said. Hyun Seok's expression sharpened. I just came out of surgery, she said. I have staples in my abdomen and an IV in my hand, and I have not slept in over 24 hours. She looked at him calmly. Your lawyer is going to have to wait until I am medically cleared to make legal decisions. That is not a negotiation. That is the law. The nurse stepped forward then. Her voice was professionally contained, but her eyes were not contained at all. Your wife is correct, she said to Hyun Seok. She is not in a condition to execute legal documents. That is not something that is going to happen in this room today. Hyun Seok looked at the nurse. It was a particular kind of look. The kind that men who are accustomed to compliance use when they encounter resistance in a place, they did not expect it. The nurse looked back at him with the calm, immovable steadiness of a woman who had stood in rooms like this before and had long since decided that her job description included bearing witness. 48 hours, Hyun Seok said, turning back to Tiana. He straightened his jacket with a single precise motion. After that, my attorney files formally, and this stops being simple. He picked up the envelope from her lap and set it on the bedside table, deliberate, unhurried. Think carefully about how you want this to go. He turned toward the door. Myungya followed him, and at the threshold she stopped and looked back one final time, not at the babies, at Tiana. The look of a woman who believed she was closing a chapter she had authored herself. She said nothing further. She did not need to. She had said everything she came to say. The girl in the cream dress was already in the hallway. And as Hyun Seok passed through the doorway, Tiana watched her reach for his arm. That same easy, practiced touch, completely comfortable, entirely at home in the gesture. Hyun Seok did not pull away. He simply walked, and she walked beside him, and then they were gone, and the door swung shut behind them with a sound so quiet and so ordinary that it felt like an insult to everything that had just happened inside this room. For a moment, Tiana did not move. The monitors beeped. The IV dripped. The fluorescent light hummed. The twins were warm against her chest, and the boy made a small sound in his sleep, and the girl was still watching her with those dark, steady, ancient eyes. The nurse crossed to her immediately, checking monitors, adjusting the IV line, her hands moving with the purposeful efficiency of someone giving herself something to do while she found her composure. Then she stopped and looked at Tiana directly, and whatever professionalism she had been maintaining stepped aside for just a moment. "I am documenting everything that happened in this room," she said quietly. "The time they arrived, every word spoken, every person who was present. I want you to know that." Tiana nodded slowly. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was very calm. It was the calm of a woman who has gone somewhere deep and internal and is operating from there because the surface is not available right now. The nurse hesitated. "Are you okay?" Tiana looked down at her twins, at the boy with his father's jaw and the girl with her own eyes. She thought about the drive to the hospital, the dark streets and the contractions coming every 3 minutes, and Renee's voice in her ear steady as a hand on her shoulder. She thought about the moment they told her the twins were in distress, and she had signed the consent form alone, her own hand shaking slightly as she wrote her name, and the nurse who held the clipboard had looked at her and said, "Is someone coming?" And Tiana had said, "Yes, he's on his way." "No," she said honestly, "but I will be." She looked at the envelope on the bedside table. She looked at it for a long time, and then she looked back at her babies and something in her chest that had been held very tightly for a very long time quietly, finally, let go. Not from defeat. From the particular release of a woman who has just been freed from the last thing that was keeping her from doing what she was always going to do anyway. "It is just us now," she whispered to them. She pressed her lips to her daughter's forehead, then her son's. "But we are going to be more than fine. I built something to make sure of that, long before today. I built something and nobody knew about it, and it is ours." She held them closer. "I promise you both. We are going to be more than fine."
Welcome to 2K Second Korean Stories. Subscribe now and join the family.
What Jang Hyun-seok does not know, what his mother does not know, what no one in that hospital room could see, is about to change everything. But to understand how a man like him could walk into that room and do what he just did, you need to understand where he came from. And you need to understand the woman who loved him before he was anyone at all. Go back 7 years. Go back to a 2-room apartment in Mapo, where a man named Jang Hyun-seok ate instant noodles at midnight, because it was all he could afford, and stared at the wall and calculated the distance between where he was and where he needed to be. His father's debts had come due when Hyun-seok was 26. The kind of debts that don't just take money. They take the floor out from under an entire family and leave everyone standing in the rubble trying to figure out which direction is up. The legitimate business was gone. What remained was a network of men who operated at the edges of things, who paid him enough to keep him moving, who used his intelligence and his precision and his ability to read a room without showing his hand, but who did not respect him, and he knew it, and the knowledge sat with him every day like something swallowed wrong. He was 29 years old, and he was exhausted in the specific way of a man who has been fighting for a long time without landing anything. Tiana James arrived in Seoul that same autumn. She was 27, a real estate analyst from Savannah, Georgia, working a contract position for a Korean development firm that needed someone who understood how American investors thought, how they spoke, what they needed to hear before they trusted a market they did not know. She was sharp and precise, and had been proving herself in every room she entered since she was 19 years old. She had a plan and a timeline, and she had not come to Seoul looking for anything except the next step in a career she had been building with both hands since she left Savannah with a scholarship, and the understanding that there was no safety net beneath her. She met Hyun-seok at a construction site walkthrough in Uido on a Tuesday morning in October. He was representing a contractor her firm was considering. He was 12 minutes late. She noted it without comment, introduced herself, and got to work. And somewhere in the course of that walkthrough, moving through concrete dust and half-finished corridors, she noticed things about him that she filed away without intending to. The precision, the economy of language, the way he looked at a space and immediately understood its potential without needing it explained to him, the way he said exactly what he meant and did not perform anything around it. In a city full of men who performed competence, it was unusual enough to stay with her. They circled each other for 3 months. Professional, careful. The mutual wariness of two people who have both learned through experience that the wrong attachment costs more than it is worth. They were in the same meetings sometimes. They exchanged information they needed to exchange. They did not have dinner. They did not have coffee that was anything other than professional. And then one evening, a meeting ran long and the last subway was gone, and they shared a taxi from Uedo toward Mapo because they were going in the same direction and taxis cost less when you split them. And somewhere in that ride, in the dark, in the particular privacy that moving vehicles create, something shifted. He talked. Not performing, not networking. Talk the way people talk when they are too tired to manage the conversation, and something in the quality of the silence next to them makes it feel safe to be honest. He told her about his father, about the debt, about the network he was trapped inside, and the legitimate world he was trying to claw his way back into, and how the distance between those two things felt, some nights, impossible. He told her because she was listening in a way that did not require him to package what he was saying before he said it. She was just there, receiving it without flinching. Without the slight backward movement that people make when something is heavier than they prepared for, she didn't flinch. She looked at him in the dark of that taxi and she said, "What would you need? Not I'm sorry, not that must be hard. What would you need to get back to the legitimate side of it?" He had not expected that question. He sat with it for a moment. Then he told her. 6 months later, she made 3 phone calls. The first was to a real estate investor she had cultivated through her firm, a man based in Chicago who had capital and was looking for a Korean market entry point and needed someone on the ground he could trust completely. The second was to a developer in Dallas who had been asking her for 2 years if she knew anyone in Seoul who understood both markets. The third was to Hyun Seok to tell him she was going to introduce him to 2 men who could change everything and that she needed him to show up on time. He showed up 20 minutes early. Those introductions were worth more than any amount of money she could have transferred into his account. They gave him legitimacy. They gave him the first door that opened onto a world he had not been able to reach on his own. Within 18 months, he had his first legitimate development deal. Within 3 years, he had a company. Within 5, he had a network that the men who had used him as an errand boy now needed access to. He did not build it alone. Tiana was there for every step. Not in the foreground, not demanding to be seen, but present in all the ways that matter most. She stayed up on nights she should have been sleeping to review contracts he needed eyes on. She extended introductions from her own professional capital when his was not enough. There were 3 separate moments in those early years when the gap between his ambition and his resources was real enough to stop everything. And each time Tiana covered it with her own savings and never once said anything that made him feel the weight of needing to be covered. She believed in him before he believed in himself. It is a specific and costly kind of love, and it has a particular vulnerability built into it. Because the moment a man stops needing what you gave him, it becomes very easy for him to forget that you gave it. They married in Savannah in the spring of their 4th year. Small ceremony. Her family, her people, a handful of his colleagues who flew in for the weekend, and Renee. Renee, who had been Tiana's best friend since they were 17 years old and shared a locker in a Savannah middle school, and had been inseparable in the way that some friendships are inseparable, the kind that survive distance and time, and every version of both people involved. Renee flew in from Georgia and stood beside Tiana at the altar, and spent most of the reception quietly watching the empty chair where Jang Myung-ya was supposed to be sitting. Because Myung-ya had not come, Hyun Seok said she was unwell. He said it simply, without elaboration, and Tiana accepted it and moved on because it was her wedding day and she was not going to let an empty chair take anything from it. She would understand the empty chair differently later. She would understand that it was not absence, it was refusal. And refusal, in Myung-ya's language, was a statement. The first 2 years of the marriage were good. Genuinely good in the way that things built on real foundation can be good. They worked. They argued. They cooked together on Sunday mornings and disagreed about money and made each other laugh in the specific private way that develops between 2 people who know each other well enough to be strange together. They understood each other the way you understand someone when you have seen them at the worst point and stayed. There was real life in those years. Real warmth. Tiana thought about it sometimes later, about those 2 years, and the thing that struck her most was how present he had been. How fully he had been in the room with her. She had started James' development group during that time. Quietly, on evenings and on weekends, in the space around the edges of her contract work. A real estate development company registered entirely in her name, built around the Korean-American market corridor. She had been living professionally for years. She knew that corridor better than almost anyone. She knew what Korean developers needed to understand about American investors and what American investors needed to feel before they trusted a Korean market. That knowledge was her specific thing. Her edge. She called the company James Development Group, and she registered it, and she began to build it the same way she had built everything else in her life, steadily, without announcing it, one careful step at a time. Hyun Seok knew about it. He was supportive in the way that a man is supportive of something he does not fully see. He called it her project, her little company. He said it with genuine warmth, and she heard the warmth, and she also heard what lived underneath it, the slight diminishment, the not quite seeing, and she decided to let it go because she was not building it for him to see. She was building it for what it was going to become. And then power came back to Hyun Seok. Real power. Network he had rebuilt consolidated around him in a way that changed how he moved through the world. Men who had once ignored him now called him first. Rooms changed when he entered them. And she watched it happen, and she was genuinely proud of him, and she did not know yet that power, when it arrives after a long hunger, sometimes changes the geography of a man's interior in ways that even he does not notice until the change is complete. His mother arrived from Busan on a Tuesday. 2 suitcases. No advance notice. She was simply there in their apartment in the kitchen, cooking a meal that smelled of Hyun Seok's childhood, and she smiled at Tiana when Tiana came home that evening with the smile of a woman who had decided that the time was right and had simply acted on the decision. She stayed. And as she stayed, she worked, not loudly. Myung-ya had never been loud. She was a woman who understood that the most effective pressure is the pressure the other person cannot feel being applied. She cooked and she kept the apartment, and she was gracious to Tiana in a way that was calibrated to seem genuine, warm enough to prevent any direct objection, thin enough that Tiana always felt, underneath the warmth, the steady, quiet message. You are tolerated here. You are not home here. And in the private moments, in the conversations with Hyun Seok that Tiana was not present for, she worked differently. She did not attack. She observed. She raised questions that sounded like concern and placed doubts that sounded like wisdom. She talked about legacy and cultural continuity and the responsibility that came with real power. She talked about what it meant for a man of Hyun Seok's standing to have a partner who truly understood his world. She talked about these things the way water talks to stone, not in one conversation, not in 1 month, but across time, across repetition, until the stone had changed its shape and could no longer remember what shape it used to be. Tiana is a good woman, she told her son. I do not say otherwise, but goodness is not the same as belonging. A woman from the other side of the world, with no family name we recognize, no understanding of who we are or what we are building, no roots that reach into anything that matters to us. She would shake her head with the sorrow of a woman who had thought about this very carefully. You have become someone important, my son. What you need now is someone who is built for this world, not someone still trying to understand it. She said it once, then twice, then in different words, then from a different angle. Across months, until the day came when she introduced him to Oh Soo-jin at a dinner Tiana had not been told about, and Hyun Seok came home that evening and mentioned it casually as though it had been nothing, a family gathering, just a few people, and Tiana looked at him and felt the drop in temperature that you feel before weather arrives. She told Hyun Seok what she felt. He said she was being sensitive. She told him again. He said his mother was simply being social. She asked him directly about Soo-jin 3 weeks later, after she found a message on his phone that she was not looking for and could not unsee. He said she was paranoid. He said she needed to stop letting her insecurities damage what they had built together. He said it with such certainty, such practiced fluency, that for a week she almost believed him. Renee came to visit 3 months after that and called Tiana at midnight from her hotel room. I need you to hear me, Renee said. Something is wrong in that house. I watched him with you all evening and I am telling you what I saw. He is not there. He is physically present and he is somewhere else. And that woman, his mother, she knows something. She is too comfortable in your apartment for a woman who is supposed to be visiting. Tiana said, it is complicated. You don't have all the context. Renee was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I have known you since you were 12 years old. I know when you are protecting someone at your own expense. I need you to stop doing that and protect yourself. Whatever that looks like. Legally, financially, in every way you know how. Do it now before you need it. Because I am looking at this from the outside and I am telling you, Tiana, you are going to need it. Tiana did not argue. She was too tired to argue, and some part of her that she had been keeping very quiet for months knew that Renee was right. She called Charles Webb the next morning. Charles Webb, an old Savannah family attorney who had done family law for 40 years. who had known Tiana's grandmother and had written the original James family will, and who Renee had specifically recommended because, Renee said, he is the kind of man who puts language in documents that nobody thinks to look for until it is too late to do anything about it. She told Charles what she needed. He asked her several questions. Then he said, I am going to write something that covers every direction I can think of. And she said, make sure it covers the directions I haven't thought of yet. He said, that is exactly what I am going to do. 2 weeks later, she found out she was pregnant. She was sitting in the bathroom of their Hanamdong apartment on a Tuesday morning with a test in her hand, and she looked at it for a long time. She felt a complicated mixture of things that she did not try to sort out. She knew she wanted these children. She had always wanted children. She also knew that the timing was what it was, and that wanting something did not simplify the circumstances around it. She told Hyun Seok at dinner that evening. She had made his favorite meal. She waited until after they had eaten, and then she told him simply and directly the way she told him everything, without decoration, without performance. I'm pregnant. He looked at her. A moment of quiet that she could not read. And then he said, my mother will be pleased, not I am pleased. Not we are going to have a child. My mother will be pleased. 4 words that told her more about where they were than anything he could have said deliberately. She filed it away in the place she had been filing things for months, and said nothing, and cleared the dishes, and went to work the next morning. The pregnancy was not easy, and she worked through all of it. Through the nausea that hit her every morning at 7 o'clock like something physical, through the fatigue that sat on her chest like a second body, through the swelling and the sleeplessness and the appointments she attended alone, because Hyun Seok was always managing something, always in a meeting, always on his way somewhere that prevented him from being where she was. She flew to Atlanta at 7 months pregnant for a presentation that could determine whether the biggest deal she had ever built toward would survive or collapse. She had been working toward this deal for 2 years. A $500 million partnership with a major American-Korean development consortium for a landmark mixed-use project in Atlanta. She had built the relationship, done the groundwork, flown back and forth across the ocean more times than she could count, adapted and revised and stayed in the room when lesser versions of herself might have walked out of it. She landed back in Seoul that evening swollen-footed and exhausted, and 2 steps closer to the finish line. Hyun Seok was not home when she got there. Myung-ya was, moving through the apartment with the comfortable ease of a woman who had stopped treating it as a place she was visiting. She made Tiana tea and asked about the trip with the warmth of someone performing interest, and Tiana sat at the kitchen table and drank the tea and was too tired to perform anything back. That night, she lay in bed and listened to the apartment breathe around her and felt the twins moving inside her, small, insistent movements, the physical language of lives that had already decided they were coming regardless of what was happening on the outside. She put both hands on her stomach and she talked to them quietly in the dark, the way she had been doing for weeks, telling them about Savannah, about the river, about her grandmother who had been the first person who ever made her feel that where she came from was something to be proud of rather than something to overcome. She told them she was building something for them. She told them it was almost ready. At 38 weeks, she woke at 2 in the morning. The contractions were 4 minutes apart, and she knew immediately what they were. She lay still for a moment, timing them, breathing through each one, giving herself the 30 seconds it took to accept that this was it and tonight was the night and she needed to move. Then she reached across the bed for Hyun Seok. His side was empty. The sheets were cold, she called him. It rang 4 times. 5. He answered on the 6th, his voice carrying the careful neutrality of a man who is somewhere he cannot name. Hyun Seok, she said. It's time. The contractions are 4 minutes apart. I need you here. A pause. Then I'm coming. I'm leaving right now. I'll be there, she waited. She timed contractions. She called Renee in Savannah, who picked up on the 2nd ring because Renee had been sleeping lightly for 3 weeks on the understanding that this call was coming. He said he's coming, Tiana said. Okay, Renee said. I'm here, talk to me. How far apart? 4 minutes, maybe 3 now. Okay. Renee's voice was completely calm, the calm of a woman who has decided that being afraid is not useful right now. Okay, you know what to do. You have done everything right this entire time. Talk to me and keep timing and tell me when he gets there. 40 minutes passed. The contractions were 3 minutes apart and then 2.5. She called Hyun Seok again. It rang and went to voicemail. She sat on the edge of the bed with the phone in her hand and Renee still on the line, and she made a decision in the space of about 4 seconds because 4 seconds was all she had. I'm driving myself, she told Renee. Renee did not argue. She said, "I'm with you. Put me on speaker. Drive carefully, and I'm with you every second." Tiana picked up the bag she had packed 3 weeks earlier because she had always known. On some level, she did not examine too closely that she might be doing this alone. She walked down to the parking garage. She got into the car. She drove through the dark streets of Seoul with a contraction hitting her every 2.5 minutes and Renee's voice coming through the speaker and her hands on the wheel as steady as she could make them because they had to be. Because there was no one else to hold them. She got herself to the hospital. She got herself admitted. She got herself to the delivery room, and when the doctor told her the twins were in distress and they needed to operate immediately, she said, "Yes, do whatever they need." And she signed the consent form with her own hand. And when the nurse asked, "Is someone coming?" she said, "Yes, he's on his way." He was not on his way. He arrived 2 hours after she had gone into surgery. He sat in the hallway outside the operating room. And what he thought about during those 2 hours, whether he felt fear, whether he felt guilt, whether any part of him understood what it meant that she had driven herself there alone and signed those forms alone and gone under alone, Tiana would never fully know. What she knew was what happened 11 minutes after she came out. She knew who walked through that door. She knew who was standing behind him. She knew what was sitting in the envelope that landed on her lap. And she knew one other thing that nobody in that room knew. One thing that had happened at 9:22 that morning while she was being wheeled toward an operating table. Her attorney had sent a single message to her phone. One word, done. The $500 million deal had closed. 3 days later, Tiana James sat in a conference room on the 31st floor of a building in Gangnam, and she looked across a long table at the man she had loved for 7 years, and she felt the particular stillness of a woman who has already done everything she needed to do and is simply waiting for the last piece to fall into place. She was wearing a charcoal blazer over a white dress. Her body still carried the deep ache of something that had been opened and put back together and was not yet finished healing. Beside her sat David Kang, a Korean-American attorney who had built his practice across 15 years on cases that looked exactly like this one, and who had not lost one yet. Hyun-seok sat across from her with Park Tae-won, his attorney, a man with silver hair and the brisk, confident manner of someone who did not expect this room to surprise him. Hyun-seok looked composed, certain. He looked like a man who had already decided how this meeting ended. Behind him, just outside the glass wall of the conference room, Soo-jin sat in one of the hallway chairs, waiting. She was not in the room, but she was visible through the glass, and she was watching, and her presence was its own kind of statement, the statement of a woman who had been told she was next and was simply waiting for the current business to be concluded. Park Tae-won placed the settlement offer on the table. He outlined it with professional efficiency, financial support for the children, a monthly allowance for Tiana for a period of 3 years, custody arrangements that positioned the twins primarily with Hyun-seok's household. He delivered it with the manner of a man presenting something generous and expecting gratitude. David Kang did not reach for the document. He looked at Park Tae-won with the mild, unhurried patience of someone who is operating from a position of complete security. "Mrs. James will not be accepting that offer," he said. Park Tae-won's expression shifted by a fraction. "I suggest we discuss what Mrs. James believes she is entitled to, because my client is being considerably generous and..." David placed a single folder on the table and slid it across. "I would like to begin with the marriage contract your client signed 6 years ago," he said. Section 9. Subsection D. Hyun-seok reached for the folder. He opened it. And Tiana watched his face the way she had always watched his face, reading the small movements that happened beneath the surface, the things he could not control completely no matter how composed he was. Any business entity or financial asset developed independently by either party during the marriage remains the sole property of the developing party and is not subject to division in dissolution proceedings. His jaw tightened. One fraction. Just one. "Turn to page 4, David said. Page 4 contained a clause that Charles Webb had drafted at Renee's specific instruction. Renee had called him the week after Tiana's wedding and said, "I need this woman protected from every direction you can imagine, and I need language in this document that nobody will think to look for until it is too late to do anything about it." Charles Webb had thought about it for 2 days and then written the following. "If either party initiates divorce proceedings within 90 days of the other party, executing a major financial transaction valued at over $100 million. The initiating party forfeits 35% of their personal net worth as liquidated damages. Park T1 was reading now with the speed of a man doing rapid recalculation. His professional composure was intact, but something underneath it had changed. David opened a second folder. On the morning of November 4th, he said, at 9:22 a.m., while Mrs. James was being prepared for emergency surgery, James Development Group executed a partnership agreement with the Meridian Atlantic Consortium for a landmark mixed-use development in Atlanta, Georgia. He placed the executed contract on the table. Total deal value, $500 million. First payment confirmed at 9:51 a.m. He paused and let the numbers exist in the room. Your client filed for divorce at 3:14 p.m. the same day, David continued. That is 5 hours and 52 minutes after the 90-day penalty period began. The filing is documented, time-stamped, and legally uncontestable. The room was so quiet that Tiana could hear the air conditioning moving through the ceiling vents. This is challengeable, Park T1 said carefully. You are welcome to try, David said pleasantly. We also have a nursing staff incident report documenting in full detail everything that occurred in the recovery room on the morning of November 4th. He opened a third folder. 4 staff members have provided written statements. Your client entered that room 11 minutes after his wife came out of major surgery and served her with divorce papers while she was holding her newborn twins and still connected to a surgical IV. He slid the folder across the table. A family court judge is going to read those statements. I would think carefully about what arguing in front of one looks like. Hyun-seok had not looked away from Tiana. He was looking at her now the way he had not looked at her in a very long time, without management, without the controlled surface, with something that was getting past all of it. You knew, he said. When I walked into that room. You already knew. I had known for 6 hours, she said. Her voice was quiet and clear. I knew about the deal and I knew about the papers. I had been watching the pieces moving into place for months. Something crossed his face. I built that company, she said, while your mother told you I had nothing worth building. While you called it my little project with that smile, that particular smile, like you were being kind about something small. She did not raise her voice, not even slightly. While I was growing your children in my body and flying to Atlanta at 7 months and driving myself to this hospital alone at 2 in the morning because you told me you were coming and then you didn't come. She held his eyes. I was building a $500 million partnership and carrying your children and loving you at the exact same time. All 3 of those things. And you did not see any of them, because someone told you there was nothing worth seeing. And you chose to believe her instead of your own eyes. His hands on the table were completely still. He was breathing differently. His net worth has been independently assessed at $31 million, David said, his voice returning the room to the business at hand. 35% is $10.85 million. Mrs. James is prepared to accept that figure. Retain full sole custody of the twins with reasonable visitation available to your client, and make no further claim on his business earnings. She is offering a resolution that is more generous than this contract requires her to be. Hyun-seok looked at Park T1. The calculation did not take long. Park T1 gave the smallest possible nod and Hyun-seok looked back at the table, and for a long moment he did not move. Then he picked up the pen. It took 4 minutes to sign. Nobody spoke while it happened. When it was done, Tiana stood, gathered her bag, and walked to the door. She stopped with her hand on the frame. She turned back. Your son's name is Yiwon, she said. She looked at him directly, without anger, without performance, with nothing but the plain truth of what she was saying. Your daughter's name is Lily. They are already extraordinary. Yiwon smiles at everything. Lily watches the world like she is filing it all away for later. They are going to grow up knowing that their mother built something that mattered while everyone around her was not paying attention. She paused. I hope you choose to know them, Hyun-seok. She said it simply. I genuinely hope you do. They deserve a father who shows up. That part is entirely yours to decide. She walked out. Renee was in the hallway. She was leaning against the wall with her arms crossed, and the look of a woman who had been right about something for 3 years and was not going to say I told you so because she loved Tiana too much to spend this moment on being right. Through the glass wall of the conference room, Tiana could see Sujin still sitting in her chair. The girl looked up as Tiana walked past. Their eyes met for just a moment. Tiana looked away first, not from weakness. Simply because she had nothing left to say to someone who had been a piece on a board in a game Tiana had already finished playing. Well, Renee said. Tiana looked at her best friend, the woman who had called Charles Webb, who had stayed on the phone in the dark of a soul road, who had known before Tiana was ready to know. "We're going home," Tiana said. Renee pushed off the wall. She said nothing else. She didn't need to. 6 weeks later, Tiana James came home to Savannah with her twins and more solid ground beneath her feet than she had ever stood on in her life. She opened James Development Group's American office on Bull Street, 2 blocks from the river, in a building with windows that caught the morning light in a way that made the whole room feel like something beginning. She hired 14 people in the first month. She began work on the Atlanta development, the project that had been closing while her marriage was ending, the one that no one in that hospital room had thought to look at. She named her daughter Lily, after her grandmother, who had been the first person in Tiana's life to tell her that where she came from was something to be carried with pride. She named her son Yiwan, a name that held both of his worlds in it, and she made certain from his very first days that he understood both worlds were entirely and completely his. Mayanya called once. Tiana looked at the name on the screen and set the phone on the table and watched it ring until it stopped. There was nothing left to say. Some chapters close themselves, and the only dignified response is to let them. Hyun Seok sent a letter, handwritten, which surprised her. It was not an apology, and it was not an explanation. It was something that existed between those two things, the careful accounting of a man who had finally sat still long enough to see clearly what he had not been seeing. She read it twice. She folded it and put it in a drawer in her desk. She did not throw it away. She was not certain why. Perhaps because some part of her understood that the man in that letter was closer to the man in the taxi in Mapo than the man who had stood at the foot of her hospital bed, and she had loved that man genuinely, and that was worth keeping somewhere even if it was not worth going back to. On the first night that both twins slept through until morning, Tiana sat alone in her kitchen in the quiet of a house that was entirely hers, coffee in her hand. The river 2 blocks away. The particular silence of a woman who has come through something long and is sitting on the other side of it, not unscathed, but standing. She thought about the taxi in Mapo and the man who had told her the truth in the dark because she had listened without flinching. She thought about the years of building, the late nights, the Atlanta flight at 7 months, the contracts, the connections, the 3 times she covered the gap and said nothing. She thought about the drive to the hospital and Renee's voice in the speaker, and her hands on the wheel in the dark. She had built a $500 million company in the margins of a life that kept trying to make her smaller. She had driven herself to give birth, walked out of a conference room on her own terms, and brought her children home to a city that had always known her name. She thought about all of it, and she felt it the way you feel things when you finally stop moving long enough to let them land. Not without weight, not without grief for what it had cost, but with something underneath all of that which was solid and real and entirely hers. She finished her coffee, rinsed the cup, and went to check on her babies, because this was never a story about falling. It was always a story about what a woman builds when no one is watching, what she protects without announcing it, what she carries forward when everything else falls away. The women who survive the hardest moments are not the women who were never broken. They are the women who kept building in the dark, in the margins, in the quiet spaces that nobody thought to look. They are the women who knew, long before the moment arrived, that it was coming. And they were ready. Tiana James was always ready. She just finally had the room to show it. If this story moved something in you, if you found yourself anywhere inside Tiana's journey, then this channel was built for you. Welcome to 2K Korean Story. If you are new here, subscribe right now and turn on that notification bell so that every story we release finds you directly. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that the woman who stays quiet is not the woman who has nothing. She is the woman who is waiting for exactly the right moment. And we will see you in the next one.